Hello, everyone. This is Shannon. Welcome to Magic is Real. This is the podcast where I interview people about their spiritually transformative experiences, and we talk about all things metaphysical and spiritual. If you like this podcast, would you do me a favor and hit the like button? And please leave comments below. It really helps with the algorithm to get this podcast out to more people so that they know it exists and so that we can share our messages with more and more people. So thank you so much for doing that. Today, I have with me Chenee Fournier, and Shanae is an intuitive, and I'm trying to find a word for it. Actually, I realized you're so much more than that. You are a soul, but I'm just going to say on your website what it says, and then I'll let you talk about yourself and share how you identify as a soul, as a human being. But Shanae is also an evidential psychic medium, but you can also she's an angel and spirit guide channel, a spiritual mentor, and an energy healer. Welcome, Shanae. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so honored that you reached out to me. I was going to reach out to you anyway to be on the show.
Thank you, Shannon. It's just such a pleasure to be here.
It is such a pleasure to have you. So, I would love to start with your childhood. Anything that you're willing and comfortable to share about your experiences, because I know that you had an awareness of your intuitive abilities early on in life, but I'd love to hear sort of what your spiritual journey was, what your experiences as a child were as it relates to your spiritual awakening.
I think my childhood could be considered very typical. However, I didn't necessarily experience childhood typically, so to say, because I was, or still am, a very highly sensitive person. So if someone is speaking to me and they're saying one thing, but then I could feel the energy from them that wasn't really matching what they were saying, I would pick up on that. As a child, that doesn't necessarily make sense to you, right? Like to me, there was like this, sometimes people were in resonance with what they were saying, and sometimes they weren't. So because I was very sensitive, um, I was able to perceive beings in spirit. I have lots of examples of walking and talking in my sleep, but I don't actually think that I was sleeping. I think I was participating with life in the spirit world, life in the other realm, while my body slept. So, not particularly an out of body experience during those moments, but aware of the other realm that's right overlaid on top of this one. So from very early on, able to perceive beings in spirit, to actually see them. They were usually beings that I could see through. And then I had something happen at about age 10 or 11. It happened at elementary school, I think is what age I was, where these girls mentioned something about if you have these certain products in your home by a certain corporation, you are already marked to go to hell. You were going to go to hell, and there was nothing you could do. You needed to hurry up and get these products out of your home, but you were still probably marked to go to hell. So I grew up in a household where we didn't talk about hell and damnation. I grew up basically unchurched, would sometimes go to church, but very not often. I don't really even recall going to church. So it wasn't like I was steeped in an environment of hell and damnation kind of talk. So it was really surprising to me looking back on it, how deep I went down that hole of like, oh my God, oh my God. So I went home, talked to my mom and dad about it, and just kind of sort of internalized the fear. So of course they told me there's nothing to worry about. Those products aren't marked by the devil. We're not going to die and go to hell. But as a kid, those kinds of explanations are not necessarily super helpful because you're sitting there grappling with it. So a number of years went by where I was afraid to fall asleep at night. My mom and dad didn't know this. I didn't go back and continually talk to them about it. I just really kind of kept it to myself. And so, anyway, a number of years went by, just really didn't want to fall asleep because I was afraid that if I fell asleep, I would lose control of my mind and would swear my soul away and would go to hell. So, it was much more than just a fear of death, it was a fear of hell. So, many years went by. So, over probably the course of 3 to 4 years, I grew out of that. But that set me on the path of wanting to know, what is all of this? What is heaven? What is hell? What is eternity? Even before that happened, I used to grapple with the concept of, well, what is eternity? You would hear people talk about eternity, and I would think, okay, well, whether you are eternally happy or eternally unhappy. Eternity is a long time. And so I would freak myself out as a kid trying to grapple with the concept of eternity. Um, so fast forward many years, I've studied all kinds of different spiritual traditions, learned about all kinds of different just beautiful things that transpire in life, continue to have really beautiful spiritual happenings and awakenings. And I really believe that all of life is spiritual, that there isn't like this spiritual side and this mundane side. Is like we can blend them and merge them. But kind of getting ahead of myself here. When I was younger and going through all of that, I found out years later that what I was feeling was me having out of body experiences. I think that it was so difficult to try to fall asleep while I was fearful about losing control of my mind and going to hell, that my soul, it still maintained focus on the body, but I think a larger part of it went ahead and had an out of body experience. Because during those times, I would have this really weird sensation that I didn't know what it was back then, but my body would vibrate and my body would get very hot. So many years later, when I started learning about out of body experiences, I learned that oftentimes when you're having an out of body experience, at the time that your soul kind of disengages from the physical body, and then at the time when it's coming back in, there's that vibratory hot sensation. So it took me many years to realize what that sensation was. Also, many years later, I think this was probably at some point in my 40s, I did 3 different of the meditations with Dr. Brian Weiss. So, not him personally, but I followed his meditations of past life regression work to find out, well, what did our past lives contain? What did we experience in our past lives? So I recognized that one of my very first lifetimes that I have a recollection of was way back in about the 16 or 1700s. And it was that time when people were being burned for being accused of being witches. So it became apparent to me that I was a healer in that original past life or a very far back past life. And during that time, the powers that be, of course, the church and the powers that be that earn money from people coming and sitting in church and listening to what they're saying, they didn't want just the average person to know how to heal themselves, that they could have a direct communication with God, with the angels. You don't need an intermediary. So I was teaching people how to talk directly with spirit, with God, with the angels. I was doing energy healing. And so that put me on the wrong side of the path for the powers that be back then. Humans, of course, not. I don't believe that there's anything in the spirit world to be afraid of. I've completely come to recognize that. But anyway, during that time, I was actually killed, and I couldn't quite see if I was killed by being stoned to death or burned at the stake. But it was a very fearful and painful sort of a death. And the people who I had helped, and there were very many of them, people who I had helped, they didn't want to come be in the, I think they were like spectators, is what they were called back then. They didn't want to come and be there. They didn't want to have to watch that. And I said, but if you don't come and do that, then the people that are condemning me and killing me will know that you're on my side, not theirs, so to say, and your life could be in danger. So I told them, so please go ahead, be in the spectator audience. If you have to yell horrible things, go for it, because you have to protect your own life. So what was beautiful is that what I saw as my physical life force was draining is that the soul separated from the physical body, and I could see like an overview of the crowd, and many of the people were not yelling hateful things. They were holding the space of love, and they were radiating love towards me, so that my death was not in pain or suffering. And what I've learned from being a medium over the years is that the human body only appears to suffer, but the soul is already pulling away from the human body and sitting vigil with the human body, waiting for that last bit of life force energy to drain out and wait for the last breath to be taken. And then once that's done, the angels will also be there along with the soul. And then the soul and the angels will just raise an elevation, they'll elevate in frequency and go into higher octaves of frequency. So I don't see the spirit world as some far off place. So whether it's spirit world or heaven, I don't see it as some far off place. I see it as a place that intermingles with us right here, but it's at a higher frequency. So most of the time, I'm not running around seeing into heaven or into the spirit world. I have clairvoyance and a bunch of other clairs, but I know how to turn them off so that when I'm functioning in this 3D world, I can function skillfully and comfortably and know what's in front of me in the physical and what's in the metaphysical. So, so after that particular lifetime, and recognizing that the beautiful people who were in the spectator crowd holding the love for me really helped my soul, just see how loved I was and move on to the next realm. Then the second lifetime I had, I was a medic in what seemed to be some sort of a civil war. And I don't know what country I was in, but I do recognize that I could smell the smell of gunpowder, and I could see that it was a black, dark landscape that was just covered over in smoke. And I was the only one standing. And so during that lifetime, I felt like my mission definitely didn't get to be completed because for some reason I was a medic in the military. And I wasn't able to save people because you can't as a medic save. I mean, you can save some people in a war, but not many. It's just a terrible, disastrous reality to be in a war. So then the third lifetime that I recognized that I had, I was now a surgeon in modern times with all of these instruments all around me and all of these tools all around me and being very successful. So then that culminated back to this lifetime where I am once again doing the healing work, and for me, mediumship and putting people in contact with their own soul, their higher self, their angels, and their spirit guides, and to teach them they can do this for themselves. They don't need us, they don't need a medium. But if they would like to use me as a medium, I'm more than happy to do that. But I really love it when, after I work with people, they come to me and they say, "Can you teach me how to do this?"
Mhm.
Because it's that whole parable of you can give a person a fish or you can teach them to fish, sort of a thing. Like, yes, I can do this work for others, but I love being able to let them know this is natural. This is absolutely what we're born to do. Each and every one of us is born to be in touch with the spiritual side of life, to be in touch with our soul, and to be in touch with everyone who leaves this physical earth and goes into a higher octave and is now in spirit world. We're born to be able to do this. And for whatever reason, over the course of time, a lot of people forget how to do that. But that doesn't mean that it can't be reawakened in them. So I know that was kind of a long answer, but it was like, kind of going down the rabbit hole as a child and just going really deep into fear. And then recognizing later on, oh, that's what those feelings were. Those feelings were me leaving the body and coming back. And then the reason why I went so deep down that hole of thinking I was going to die and go to hell was because I had had that one lifetime so many years ago where I was killed with hateful things being yelled towards me, saying that I was evil. And the one thing I always clarify is I do not believe in evil. I do not believe in hell. I do not believe in the devil. I believe that belief system that says there is nothing but God, there is nothing but source, there is nothing but love, and that we come here as an expression of all of that. But we do have free will. So I do know that there's a lot of crappy stuff going on in this world every day, but there's also a lot of beauty going on in this world every day. And for me, when I use the word the terminology soul, that's an acronym that can stand for space of unified love, source of unified love. And for me, the soul exists around our body as a field of energy and then coalesces into this physical form and holds us in integrity. And so at the same time, it's in the spirit world as it is here experiencing this physical world, but a much larger percentage of our soul and our spirit beingness is in the spirit world, and only a part of it is here. So that's why for me, I could tell that when I was young, it was the soul. Just it wasn't the soul wasn't leaving my body, it wasn't ignoring my body, but a larger part of it, I think, was going into the spirit world, going back home into the spirit world so that I could get sleep, so that I could actually fall asleep. Because if you don't get sleep, it's really hard to function and feel healthy. So I just think that my soul has been watching over me and guiding me and protecting me no matter what, even during the times of life where I just thought, well, I'm just not going to believe in anything, because if I don't believe in anything, there's nothing to fear. But then I found my way back around to believing in a source of all goodness, and in the inherent goodness of all of creation.
Thank you so much for sharing. I relate so much with that as a HSP myself.
Mm.
I had a very similar childhood with sleepwalking, sleep talking. My mom saying that she would hear me screaming and she thought I was being killed and she'd run in the room. I just had really fitful sleep and I was always wandering around. Um, and so I now understand, as you sort of put the pieces together, that that's what was happening, and that I was interacting with soul, spirit beings, not anything dark, all love, but just being very sensitive and absorbing so much. I was very, very sensitive. And so I assume that this was a gradual evolution to understanding that you're a medium and to doing these, I'm assuming, past life regressions, or did you do that on yourself? How did you become aware of the fact? How did you put these pieces together? Simply
My
by learning more about spirituality, or was it like one thing? Or tell me about that.
Yeah, no, for me, it was a succession of things. I know sometimes people will have a story like this one thing happened and everything made sense. But for me, it's a process. There is an actual philosophy called process theology, that everything is in process, including God. For me, I often use the word source instead of God, but I kind of use them interchangeably at times as well. And that belief system is every single thing is in process of becoming, that even God, source itself, is through us, through individuated expressions of itself, is expanding, is evolving, is growing. And so for me, my whole life, I feel like, has been a process of incremental growth. And then there have been things that happen that, wow, they just really blow the doors wide open. And I think, oh my goodness, how could I ever doubt anything? How can I doubt that there is this beautiful source of this life force energy and that my soul has a bird's eye view? And then if I listen to my angels, my spirit guides, and my soul, I use my free will as a human because I'm all those things combined together. And if I can use my free will to listen to all of that, that my life just flows more beautiful than I ever could have imagined or ever would have even thought was possible. So I've had so many experiences in life where people have shown up at the right moment to keep me physically alive. Like situations, like one particular situation was um, when I was snowboarding back in my 30s, and a lot of things happened up to this point as well. But in my 30s, I was snowboarding and I did that thing you're not supposed to do where you go off trail and you're out kind of in the back country, but not that far off trail, but not on groomed trails anymore. And it was the last run of the day. And I got separated from the two other people that I was with. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I need to try to backtrack and get myself back on trail because all of a sudden I realized I'm lost. And this was before cell phones, or if there were cell phones, then I didn't have one. And so I'm snowboarding and trying to really figure this out. And, in the mountains, when the sun goes down, it gets dark fast. So I'm realizing, wow, this is the last run of the day. And I found my way back to beneath the ski lift chairs. But ski lift chairs, sometimes they go over rugged terrain and then go back onto the inbounds area of the ski run. So, for whatever reason, when the ski patrol yelled down to me to see if I needed help, I have no idea why I did this, but I said, no, I'm fine. It was like it wasn't even my voice, but it was. I'm like, no, I'm fine, because part of me was embarrassed that I needed help and I was doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing, which was skiing out of bounds. So once again, that sort of like, I think a lot of sensitive people are this way. We really turn to our own selves to figure out our own stuff, and we don't think we need help when sometimes we do. And so I thought, okay, no, I got this. I can just stay underneath the ski chair lift and get myself back to the resort or whatever. And then all of a sudden I realized, wow, there are these big boulders in front of me, and I can't take off my snowboard and walk because now I'm in powder. And if you're in powder, you just sink into it. So I was just thinking, oh my goodness, I don't know. This could actually be the end of me. But at the moment, the adrenaline's kicking in, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, surely I can figure this out. I'm not really quite sure which way I'm supposed to go, but surely I can figure this out. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these two men show up on snowboards, And they asked me, "Are you lost?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am." And they said, "Well, follow us back. We'll get you back to the resort." And I was so thankful. And they took me perpendicular to where I was going to go. I was going to, if I had kept going the direction I was going, I would have ended up nowhere near the resort. And, Tahoe is where it was, Lake Tahoe. And I probably would have frozen to death that night. It would have gotten really, really, really cold. So, anyway, they got me back to the resort. And then it was sort of one of those things where they waved and just went off. And then I just thought, okay, what are the chances that they also were skiing out of bounds? So the angels already tried to help me by the ski patrol. And I'm like, no thanks. And they're like, okay, woman, this is really not intelligent. So then they're like, okay, we're gonna materialize ourselves into these two men and then help you. So it was interesting because I believe that they were two ski patrol men on the lift, and then two men on snowboards that showed up. So that's really interesting as well too. And I've never tried to unpack that part. But anyhow, I have had so many experiences in life where I have made not the most intelligent decision, and it could have ended poorly for me physically, but just at the right moment, somebody shows up. And I mean, I have story after story after story after like that. And I even have a story of when I was driving on a curvy mountainous road one time at 2 a.m. And it was my friend's car who I was driving because she had been drinking. So she was the passenger, and she had a Volkswagen Bug. And those are the kind of cars that they have the trunk up front. There's no engine up there that could really protect you if you hit something. And it was a very curvy road. And I just had this intuition. I just heard, slow down. And so I was coming around a corner and I started going like 15, 10 miles an hour, really slow. And she was like, "What are you doing? Why are you going so slow?" I said, "I don't know. I just have an intuition to slow down." And we came around the corner and our headlights lit up this deer, this buck standing in the middle of our lane with the full rack of antlers and everything. And if I had been going 45, 50 miles per hour or more around that corner and had hit that deer, that would have, probably, well, it would have been a terrible accident. The deer would have come through the windshield, and then we would have been a car immobile around the backside of a curve. So I just have story after story of things like that happening. And every single time something like that happens, it cracks me open even wider. And so now I feel that because so many of those things still continue to happen to this day, of me listening to my intuition, which is how I think the angels and my soul speak to us as humans, is through our intuition. It's like, even if I wanted to go back to not believing in anything, it just wouldn't be possible. And I wouldn't want to go back to that way anyway. My life just flows with so much more ease. Now, of course, I have roadblocks like people encounter at times, or we all face challenges. So I don't feel like, oh, I'm following this path and I'll never have a challenge again. But I do believe that the challenges are further apart from each other. And I'm much more equipped now when I do face the challenges because I know that I don't face them alone.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah. When did you realize that you could, quote unquote, talk to the dead? And and how did you figure out what they were saying to you?
Oh, goodness. And I know you say that jokingly, but I always tell people I'm not talking to the dead because no
Yep.
one actually dies.
Yep.
So I do
Exactly.
like to always clarify that I'm talking to their loved one, that whose life has it's continued beyond this physical form. But goodness, that probably, oh my goodness, I don't even know an exact moment when that happened. I do know that all the way back in my late teens, I was able to interact with spirit. And I wouldn't have known to call it mediumship back then because that wasn't something that was really on my radar. But, and it wasn't even so much, as being a medium as well, it's not like this spoken word. I don't see mouths move. It's much more of, we're communicating telepathically.
Hmm.
So then if, like, let's say I would be in a home and the spiritual energy that was there was very playful. So I don't believe that spirits or souls get stuck places. What I believe is that just like we shed skin cells as a physical body, I believe our light body is always shedding light cells. We're always shedding light everywhere we go. And if you're in an area for long enough, you'll leave what is sort of like an energetic residue behind. It's basically a memory packet of energy. It's a vibrational residue that can get left behind. So whenever I would end up in those kinds of environments and there'd be kind of a playful spiritual energy, turning off the lights, or one time they turned off my furnace when I lived in Oregon and I didn't have heat or air and I had to go downstairs and turn the furnace back on. I just basically let them know telepathically, you are welcome to coexist with me here. I know this was your house first, but you can't do this kinds of stuff. You can't wake me up at night walking around on the hardwood floors. You can't turn things off that I need. And so as soon as I sent that message out telepathically, then that kind of stuff stopped. But so I guess I can't really pinpoint exactly when it was, but over the course of the 14, 15 years that I practiced energy healing and worked with clients, that's when it became really apparent to me. You know what? Not only am I not doing this work alone, I'm doing it with my spirit guides and my angels, I'm also doing it with my clients' angels and with their soul and their spirit guides. So I don't ever read people without their permission. I'm not one of those people that someone says, tell me about this guy I'm dating. I don't do that kind of work because I know that some psychics will say, oh, well, I can psychically get their permission to read them. That doesn't resonate with me. So unless the physical person is standing in front of me or is in front of me on the screen on Zoom saying, you have permission to read me, I don't do that. So when I first started noticing that messages were coming through to for the clients, I would basically let it be known like, well, unless I get my client's permission to read them like this, I'm going to close that because that seems invasive of privacy. So then I would start to ask people, are you open to intuitive messages that want to come through? And 99% of the time, the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. And then I'm fine. I respect that. So it's been a very long time that I recognized that I've been able to interact with spirit, but my mediumship skills really came on board super full force in 2020. And I actually went through a course with Suzanne Giesman and with Mavis Patilla, or actually it was a student of Mavis Patilla. And then I was invited to go on to level 2 with Mavis Patilla, but then that's when I decided to take a class with Suzanne Giesman because I wanted different, flavors of mediumship, so to say, different teaching styles, and just to really figure out, well, how do I want to appear in this world as a medium? How do I want to be? And during that time, one of my sweet dogs, and my dogs are like my kids, I don't have children. And so my dogs are my family. And during that time, one of my dogs had a medical event where something went on internally for him. And from the moment that he stopped being able to like move very easily to the moment that I had to decide to go ahead and euthanize him, only 6 hours transpired. So it was very, very traumatic for me. And being a highly sensitive person, it was very traumatic. But even during that event, I had taken him to the emergency ER. A friend and I took him to the ER, and they gave him some medicine. They did an ultrasound, and they said, "Yeah, it seems like something inside of him has burst, and so we don't have a surgeon until tomorrow. We'll try to keep him alive throughout the night if you think you might want to do surgery for him." And I said, I'm just not quite sure because, what are the chances of this surgery really helping him? And they said, probably not very good because of his age. I mean, he had been in decent health all the way up to that point, but they could just tell through the ultrasound that something had happened internally. And so I just didn't want to put him through that kind of stress. And I thought, okay, well, can you just give him so many pain medications that I can at least take him back home and sit with him and interact with him soul to soul and figure out what does he want? And if it feels like he's suffering, I'll bring him back and euthanize him. If he's still alive in the morning and I haven't had to bring him back, I'll make the decision about the surgery then because he can't have it until tomorrow anyway. So we bring him back home. And all these signs are happening on the way home as well. And then because I am very sensitive and I don't want anything to suffer, I get home and I start recognizing, okay, his life force is really draining out of him. And he really just doesn't seem comfortable. And I know that he's letting me know that it's probably his time. So I take him back to the ER. And while I'm in the room, I'm purposely standing there, opening up what I call a healing oasis. And I'm calling in the angels and I'm calling in these spirit guides. And without me doing this, a portal of light opened up, I think, on my left-hand side, and it was a vertical portal of light. So I'm creating an orb of light that is a healing oasis and a vertical portal of light light opened up on my left hand side. And then who appeared through that portal of light was my other dog, who had been best buddies with this current dog that's here alive physically during this time. And she was a shepherd, and her name was Astrid. And so she appeared through the portal of light in her familiar form so that I would know who she was. And she wasn't focused at me at all. She was focused on my dog, Lovey. And so I knew right then and there, okay, the vet is going to tell me, yes, he's cracking. And yes, it would be more kind to go ahead and euthanize him. And I just knew that Astrid had shown up to take Lovey back home. And so I just knew then, okay, well, it is time for him to go. And so I placed my hands on him, placed my forehead on him. And then when the vet came back in, I gave her permission to go ahead and euthanize him, to do what's the most humane thing. And then after that whole process finished, that portal of light closed up and then dissipated. And then after Lovey's transition, I did bring him back home, and then I went ahead and, buried him. And that night, after I buried him, I said, what will be our sign that you're still right here with me? Because I know our loved ones never leave us. If they have other things to do, they can do that as well. But I said, what will be our sign? What should I watch out for that's your reminder that you're still right here with me? And I heard an owl hoot. And I said, oh, will it be owls? Like through my tears, because I'm crying at this point. And then the owl hooted again. And I'm like, okay, it'll be owls. And then from that point forward, I have so many stories about interactions with owls. I have stories about Lovey, my dog in spirit, messing with my GPS system on my car and taking me where he wanted me to go. So I have like story after story after story of all this beautiful stuff. And so I determined then, I even asked Lovey, I said, are you now my mediumship guide? And I heard this resounding yes. I had the full body, like, spirit shimmers, is which I call it when you get those shivers or whatever, like spirit shimmers. And I just got that beautiful resounding yes. And so even though it broke my heart, and I totally didn't expect for Lovey to make his transition when he did, I recognized that he did that for me, to really open me up even further and to help me grow even more exponentially than I had ever grown before. I sort of saw him, or I do still see him, as like the professor at the PhD level of awakening. So from 2020 on forward, so I just, I took the classes, I was practicing with fellow students. I was sometimes doing, in addition to doing my current work that I'm doing as an energy healer, I was also doing 3 hours worth of mediumship readings a day, sometimes 4 days per week. And after a number of months of doing that, I very clearly heard, okay, it's time to stop practicing and start doing. You've been doing this for years anyway. Now you're really ready to do this. Because it's always been very important to me to do this work with integrity, to do it with honesty. So if I'm interacting with my client and I don't yet know the person's name, but I hear them say the name, I don't take credit for that. I don't now start using the name and pretend like that came through mediumistically. I'll say, oh, your loved one's name is whatever, because you just used the name. So it's always very important to me that the information that comes through me ethically, honestly, and that if it does come through because they've let it slip, whether the relation that it is to them or the name, I always tell them, oh, okay, you just gave me information. And then I remind them, if it's at all possible, I know it's really exciting to get this information, but if it's at all possible, don't fill in the blanks for me. Because at the end of the reading, I want that person to walk away from their reading thinking, oh my gosh, I just got to spend 45 minutes to an hour with my loved one that I thought that I would never see again. So I don't know if you feel this way or not, but I feel like for me, and I don't remember, did you do energy healing before doing mediumship?
Reiki in the mid kind of in the middle of it. I'm a Reiki master, and I
Okay.
don't practice it, but I took it to enhance my abilities in mediumship, actually.
Okay, perfect. So for me, I was a medium but didn't know it, went into energy healing. That was my focus, and kept getting all these intuitive hits and these intuitive images and would speak those through. And that's what really led me to really open up and become a medium. But honestly, what I feel is one of the biggest wounds of humanity is that fear of death. What is life for? What is suffering for? Oh my gosh, what happens to us after we die? And so I believe that a lot of self sabotaging behaviors is because of that existential angst of the ultimate fear of death. So for me, after I started doing the mediumship readings, I came to realize that for me, anyway, I'm not speaking for anybody else, mediumship readings, higher self, spirit guide, angel channeling readings, all of that for me is an ultimate form of energy healing. And in fact, what I've seen sometimes is that when people are on the opposite side of my camera on Zoom getting a mediumship reading, at the end of it, I'll get feedback a week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later. Oh my goodness, Shanae, that reading was so healing, that this thing that I had been dealing with health wise that had been going on for so long, I recognized I don't have that ailment anymore. So, and oftentimes or almost always when I start my sessions, I always set the intention, may the words that I speak create sound waves that are imbued with healing frequencies and coated with love and infused with light. So the mediumship readings for me and the angel and spirit guide channeling readings, those are a form of energy healing as well.
I agree. I think that, yeah, I think that what we do is healing simply by virtue of not just comforting someone who's in grief, but also connecting with the spirit world with them. So, and also obviously getting to meet that person's loved one on the other side, in spirit. And yeah, just to hold space for someone that's in grief, to connect for that time, the intimacy and the support. But also, you're right that the energy healing is happening at, just as sort of a byproduct of that too. So
Right,
it's all about intention, like you said, when you give your speech at the beginning or your prayer, your intention, um, that all of the messages that come through be imbued with love
mm,
and be in the sitter's highest and best good and in the highest and best good of the spirit world. Then you just let spirit do the work. Then
right,
then they
right,
just take over and they just use us as that conduit. And then
right,
you just say, all right, tell me what you want this person to know. Please send the energy they need to receive. Please help them to find peace or whatever it is. And I think
right,
that's so much. You teach mediumship. I do too, because as you said, people don't need us. It's just that for me, I can speak for myself that I just was obsessed with it. So that's
mm,
why I studied so
right,
extensively. That's why I sit in the power regularly and why I meditate so much. Anyone can do it, but if you're not really that interested in it, you're not
right,
going to take the time and energy to develop the skill. So it's not that no one can do this but us. It's
right,
that we choose to do it. And so that's the only reason that my skills are more honed than your average person who just hasn't done it yet. But
right,
everyone has the capability to do what we do. It helps to be a highly sensitive person
right,
because we're so sensitive to nuance and to the nuance of energy. And like you said, someone can be saying to you, my name is Jason, but really they can be you're like that doesn't feel authentic to me because actually their
right,
name is George or something like that. So yeah, we pick up on very subtle things just innately, which helps, but it doesn't even you don't have to be. All you have to do is have the faith, the belief, the willingness to learn.
right,
And you said something beautiful to me when we before we were recording about how you I also hesitate to call myself a light worker because I don't it sounds sort of ostentatious or uh, pretentious, and it isn't. It's if you want to use that term, that's fine. Um, and I'll have you kind of explain what you sort of prefer to use, but also that there's this reason why it's the work that we're doing is so important, and not to be self-aggrandizing.
right.
Completely the opposite. But tell me what you shared with me because I think now is a really important time for you to share what you shared with me.
So I believe that it's always been the time for cooperation instead of competition. But as the world continues and as humanity grows and as the whole beautiful world itself, the planet as a sentient being continues to evolve as well, I believe that those of us who know that we came here to do, whether it's light work or spirit work, I've heard frequency holder. I mean, there's all these different terminologies. And yeah, I was mentioning to you, I don't want to sound like I'm better than anyone else if I use those terminologies. Sometimes it's just kind of easy to use a term because that's what someone is going to understand. So it's easy for the sake of the conversation. But yeah, I believe that anyone who is here, anyone who knows that they're here to try to make the world kinder and gentler and to help with the expansion of consciousness, to help with all of us awakening. I think really now is the time to truly work together to uplift one another, to shine light on one another, to truly work in cooperation with one another and not feel like we're in competition with one another. Because I really feel like, I know a lot of spiritual teachers have said this, but I really feel like it feels like time is speeding up. But I think what that actually is that frequency is rising. And so we're actually elevating into higher octaves of frequency. So I love that, like, a terminology that kind of dropped into me. I heard a different medium use the word a vibration ship. And then I immediately heard frequency ship. And so I love the fact that I can listen to another medium and hear a terminology and then think, oh, that's a beautiful terminology. And then immediately have my spirit guides, my soul, my angels drop in another terminology. Because for me, all of life is energy. I do believe that. Scientists will say that all of life is different frequencies of energy. And so that's why you and I and anyone else who communicates with beings in spirit, even if it's just our own loved ones and we're not trying to do this for other people, we're just tapping into a higher frequency. So I believe that what's happening on this earth right now, which is so beautiful, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it, is that this whole gorgeous planet itself, as a sentient being, is expanding. It is evolving itself because even it's in process of becoming the best version of itself. And then as that's happening, it's magnetized to even more frequencies of source, the angels, the spirit guides, that higher frequency where there is no duality. You don't have to have hate to have love. You don't have to have war to know peace. All that philosophy that says, well, you have to have the opposite to experience this. Not in the spirit world, you don't. And then I've heard other people say, oh, the spirit world is boring, so we choose to come here in physical form. And I don't mean to make fun of what anybody else says. And I realize it just came out that way. But it's just because my spirit guides, my soul has been like, oh my goodness, no, it's not boring here. It's gorgeous and it's beautiful. And we choose to focus on this physical world where humanity takes place and where all of consciousness in any form at this level is taking place. But as the frequency of the earth is rising into higher octaves, then all of us that call it home, we get to rise in frequency as well. We get to tap into more subtler and higher levels of frequency. And I think the reason why it's good that previously it's been happening incrementally is because I don't know if this happens to you, but when I do mediumship work, I had to learn how to have really good boundaries so that if I'm speaking with someone in spirit and they want to let me know how their physical transition took place, I don't feel that pain. I don't feel like that, oh my God. So I let my spirit guides know when I'm interacting with beings in spirit, please be the gatekeepers, so to say, to where they drop into me claircognizantly what they want me to know, but not clairsentiently, so I don't feel it. But it's still to this day, I get very hot. I'm doing the readings, I sweat. Um, I get these vibrational feelings. I get tingles on the top of my head. And so when I'm out in public, this has happened a few times at a lake that I live nearby that I go to almost every day. I was sitting in meditation one day and I saw this gorgeous portal, but it was kind of a small one. It wasn't big and grandiose, kind of a small portal of light open up near me. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. What is that? And this was quite a few years ago. So now I know, and I knew pretty quickly what it was then. But now, if it were to happen again, I would know. But this portal opened up and everything it's like when you look across pavement and you can see the heat waves across the pavement. That's what it looked like when I looked at the portal. And I felt really, I felt like I had vertigo. I felt like, oh my goodness, am I dehydrated? Do I need to eat food? I was trying to figure out what was going on in that moment. And then all of a sudden, I just kind of got this clarity of like, no, this is just a really beautiful, almost like a parallel universe, but not necessarily a whole universe. It's a portal of something. So I stood up and I walked a little bit away from it. and I felt differently immediately. I didn't have that sense of almost like vertigo. So then I'm kind of like scientifically minded as well as being spiritually minded. So I like to test things. So I went and stood near it again, and I got that same feeling. So I recognize that if we try to go from point A to Z a little bit too fast or way too fast, we can kind of be blown open a bit too fast and then need to figure out how to get our land legs, so to say. So right now, it feels like the time for anyone who's come here with the express purpose of, I want to help make Earth more heavenly. I feel like Earth is kind of heaven adjacent right now. Like it's like there's
Yeah.
too much stuff going on in this world of suffering for me to say this is heaven or
Yeah.
this is the spirit world. But what I feel is that all these beautiful beings in spirit are right here with us, doing the hard work with us, doing the work that needs to be done so that we all can play our role for all of consciousness to ascend. Not humanity, not just humanity, right? But animals, the trees, the rocks, this planet Earth itself, for it all to ascend, because I do honestly believe in that concept of the new Earth, that we can all work together to help this Earth evolve, because it's the vehicle in which human life and animal life and all life evolves. And then it can evolve to such the point that it's no longer just heaven adjacent, but it's actually a blended heaven and earth. And then if people are in the spirit world and they think, oh, I'd like to go and have kind of an earthly experience again, well, they can come here, but there won't be the duality that there is here at this moment. And it will be bliss, it will be beautiful, and that will be fine because we all will have evolved spiritually to where we'll look back on what life used to be like from the future, looking back and think, oh my gosh, we were like that at some point. We behaved that way, and we now will have evolved so far ahead that that be in the akashic records, all of that knowledge will be there, but we won't ever like I don't believe that we need hate to know love. We don't need war to know peace. Maybe once upon a time throughout evolution that was necessary. It's no longer necessary. So now I believe that we're here to do this work to make this world more beautiful and to invite everyone up with us. And I am so infinitely grateful for people who came before me who did this work and people who gave up a lot to do this work. And I think a lot of us who do this work, we make sacrifices, it's a
Mm.
unique way to live life. And I'm also grateful for the people who are in the spirit realm, the spirit beings, the spirit people, the spirit entities that are in the spirit world that are there cheering us on and
Yeah.
entraining us. I don't know if you know much about that musical concept of entrainment, where you have a room full of guitars and you pluck a string, and all the other guitars within a certain radius will start vibrating at that. So I do believe that our loved ones in spirit, our angels, our spirit guides, our souls, they're always entraining us to the highest versions of ourselves. But we can only match and meet what we're ready for and what we can process and synthesize. And so I also like that concept that as physical beings, we can evolve to someday, and I can't remember who it was that originally said this, but the thought that you can be nourished by doing what you love. So then nothing else will have to die so that we can live. No animals will have to die. No plants will have to die so that we can feed this human body. But instead, we'll be nourished by light. We'll be nourished by doing what we love. And that's not my original thinking. I'm repeating something that I've heard said. But when I heard that, just my whole body said, yes, that makes such perfect sense. And then I think then the next evolution would be that we are no longer a carbon based life form, that we're a pure spirit based life form. So perhaps we started as spirit, we came into physical, and now we're working our way back to being spirit. And once again, that's also not an original thought. I don't try to take credit for things that didn't come through me. But when I heard that thought, I was like, oh my gosh, another full body, yes. And I also want to clarify that I do really believe that people who come here and they are really good parents, that is so important, to be really good parents and to give a safe home for children. So if you're a good parent, a good teacher, a good medical doctor, a good massage therapist, a good garbage collector, whatever it is that you do in this world, as long as you do it with love and you do it to the best of your ability and you do it because you want to make the world better and kinder and more beautiful and more gentle, that I think is being a light worker as well. So, and I believe that also everything in life can be spiritual. Like that whole concept of take your meditation off of the cushion, take your yoga off of the mat, take your prayer out of the building. Like our whole life can be our meditation, our whole life can be our prayer. And so that's why I love the work that you're doing in this world and others like you and like us, is I think that we are contributing so much light into the grids of light that surround every single thing, including every single cell, that I think we're doing our part. And I think that it's so beautiful to be able to have conversations like this with someone like you, is that I feel uplifted. By the end of this phone call, I am going to just feel like this whole new level of a person because of you and I coming together and creating this whole new field of energy that didn't exist before we came together. Yes.
So beautifully said, Shanae. Thank you. I feel the same way. That's why I do this work. I do it to help take the fear out of death and life. And
Right.
also, as you said, I always say that death isn't a thing. It's not a thing. However, transitioning to another form and leaving this world and leaving people behind, that's very real.
Yeah.
Um, and we do have to acknowledge that. So we do. And I just want to thank you so much for being here for all of the reasons that you just stated. Is that I really hope that more of us will get on the same page in terms of remembering that while this world is very harsh and dense and there's really rough stuff happening, that we can make it better by being the change we wish to see and by being the love and hopefully creating a ripple effect, as you said. So I'd love for you to share to just anything coming up for you in terms of what services you're offering. And we will, of course, have a link below to where to reach you. But anything that you want to share about even just your services, what kind of services you provide, and how to get on board with that.
Mhm. I have my website, CheneeFournier.com, and that's where I have all of my abilities for people to book with me. So people can have readings where I will tap into their higher self and their angels and spirit guides, whichever works best for them and they prefer. And I will bring through messages for them, but equally as important, I will teach them during that session, just give them pointers of how to do that for themselves.
Oh, that's
And
great.
even in those kinds of readings, I'll bring through evidential sorts of things so they can go, oh, okay, yeah, that is my personality. Yes, that is what I did a week ago. Yeah, whatever, what I'm going to do 2 weeks from now. I do the mediumship readings where I'm interconnecting with people's loved ones who are in spirit so that I can help assure them that even though your loved ones are no longer here physically, they're still here, just at a different frequency, and they still want to maintain a relationship with you. The relationship with our loved ones doesn't stop just because the physical form is no longer animated. And so those are my mediumship readings. And then I also like to work with people doing spiritual mentoring to teach them how to do this work for themselves. And one of the biggest things I do with that work, or with all of my work as well, is to teach them there is nothing to fear. Absolutely. Because a lot of people, they'll be prevented from coming to a medium or even to tap into their loved ones themselves and continue that relationship with them because of fear. And so
Yeah.
for me, just really dispelling that myth of fear. There's really nothing to fear. There's plenty to fear in the physical world, but the metaphysical world, the spirit world, nothing to fear, period. And also, I will be on a panel for Spiritual Awakenings International on June 8th. I believe the whole conference is 7th and 8th, and it's all online.
Oh,
And
great.
yeah, I'll be on a panel of spiritual experiencers and how that's affected our life and how others can tap into their intuition to have experiences themselves.
And I assume that link will be on your website.
Yes.
You don't
Yeah.
have it probably yet. If it's in
Actually, it's up. Yeah, it's on my website
great.
and
It's
it's an
okay, good.
active link. Yeah, and I believe that it's a by donation. So people, if they
Fantastic.
really can't afford a ticket, and this is Spiritual International, Awakens International, not me, but
Yeah.
it's all by donation. And so anyone who, like when I reach out to my email list to remind them of it, I will probably just simply say, if you're not able to donate anything, please at least do an act of kindness. Because I do
Yeah.
believe in that reciprocity
Yeah.
of what we do for others comes back to us tenfold. Now, if someone just really is low in life and just really feels depressed and they really can't do anything, but send out a good thought, send out a prayer, send out love. I believe even the smallest act of kindness that we do does, as you said, create these ripples in this beautiful world. And I think that that's what it's all about, is changing the world for the better through our acts of kindness, through our love, through our care for each other.
I do too, and thank you so much for that message. I think it's really helpful. Like you said, it's always needed, but just there's a lot happening right now, and it's not that things haven't been happening throughout centuries. It's just that now with social media and
Right.
and all, we can see it. It's all everywhere, and it can be very overwhelming. So I think it helps to remember to do our best to keep ourselves centered and doing your own healing work. We can't heal everybody, but we can heal ourselves. We can work to heal ourselves to be of service to others and the ripple effect, and do what we can, but not to take it all on
Right.
and at once, or else it's just then you become sort of shut down. So let's not do that.
Right.
Thank you so much, Shanae, for being here today and for just your beautiful energy and your wisdom and insight, and for sharing that. It really means a lot to me, and I know it will for the audience as well.
Oh, thank you, Shannon. It was my pleasure.
My pleasure too.